Welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka from our studios here in London. Over the next half an hour, we'll be looking beyond the business headlines by giving you in-depth perspective on the stories that are affecting all of us. Coming up on today's show, the Virunga National Park, located in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo, has been at the crossroads of an intense conflict for oil involving foreign fossil fuel interests, armed militia groups and corrupted officials for almost a decade. Despite the global trend to shift away from fossil fuels and invest in renewable energy, the DRC is being accused of taking a dangerous and unsustainable path towards oil exploration and exploitation. I'll be discussing more about this with Landrine Intereste, the Regional Director of 350.org. He'll be joining me from Uppsala in Sweden. And in the aftermath of last weekend's penalty defeat for England against Italy in the final of the Euro 2020, there were ugly scenes. 19 police officers were injured outside the stadium, and the Metropolitan Police reported 49 arrests. Among the incidents were the horrific levels of racial abuse on social media sites by fans targeting England's black footballers. The disgraceful aftermath has dented hopes that Britain and Ireland will be successful at their European 2030 World Cup bid. I'll be discussing this with the current affairs analyst and former footballer Michael Potter, who will be joining me from Manchester. Then later, I'll be reporting on the biggest company stories of the week. But first, let's start the show with business news from here in the UK, where earlier in the week, banks were given a boost to their share price after the Bank of England scrapped restrictions for the distribution of dividends and share buybacks. The dividend payout ban was introduced in April last year to ensure lenders were sufficiently prepared to deal with the financial fallout of the pandemic. Payout restrictions were loosened in December and have now been fully given the green light. The Bank of England applauded the banking sector's resilience for steering the UK economy through the pandemic and for having the liquidity to withstand further punches. In other British business news, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has confirmed that England will move into the fourth and final stage of the government's roadmap for lifting lockdown restrictions in just a few days' time. On the 19th of July, social distancing rules and limits on social contact will be removed across the country.
We're removing the government instruction to work from home where you can, but we don't expect that the whole country will return to their desks as one from Monday. And we're setting out guidance for business for a gradual return to work over the summer. And as a matter of social responsibility, we're urging nightclubs and other venues with large crowds to make use of the NHS COVID pass, which shows proof of vaccination, a recent negative test, or natural immunity as a means of entry.
Despite the legal requirements to wear face masks ending on Monday, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has said Transport for London will continue to enforce the wearing of face masks on services in the capital beyond the 19th of July. Well, for more on this, I'm now being joined by our business correspondent, Simon Pusey. Simon, I was listening to one medical practitioner who said Britain is an outlier. No other country in the world with record surging cases is allowing people to go back to normal. Do you think we'll see a U-turn on Monday's proposed plans?
Yeah, they're absolutely right. No other country is doing this, and I think every other country in the world will be looking at the UK to see exactly what happens in the coming days and weeks and how we react to this. It is really distinct compared to the rest of the world and takes, some would say bravery, some would say foolishness of the government to do this. If we just quickly go through what is going to change on Monday, assuming that they don't change their minds, no limits at all on how many people can meet in or outdoors. The 1 metre rule that we have, or the 2 metre rule, depending on where you are, that's going to be scrapped, apart from on a few sort of transportation things and in crowded places. Face covering is no longer required by law like they currently are. Nightclubs can open. And from Monday, people over 18 who come back from a quarantine, from a amber list country, who've had both their vaccines do not need to quarantine. So those are the sort of main changes I think that we'll see on Monday. And the reason why is that Boris is saying that it's highly probable that the worst of the pandemic is over. The Prime Minister thinks that we're over the worst of it. And this, we are going through a third wave. What the scientists are calling it a natural third wave. So the last waves were ended through this unnatural breaking or lockdowns. This one, we're going to try and come out of it naturally, which is basically it's going to taper out at some point. It's going to reach a level where, because of the vaccinations that we've had and because of a few other measures, because people have got antibodies already having caught coronavirus, it's going to naturally fade away. The plan is basically that it'll exhaust itself. And I think the main reason that the government and scientists think, or some scientists think this is a good idea, is that at some point we're going to have to learn to live with the disease. We can't keep going in and out of lockdowns because, you know, people can die in other ways, and a lot of those ways are sort of cancer, people waiting for appointments, you know, suicides, things like that. So the government and scientists are saying there could be 100 to 200 deaths per day in the future as a result of what they're planning. But if you put that in perspective, for example, in the winter of 2017, 2018, very cold winter, there were 300 to 400 flu deaths every day at that point, or the peak of that. So I think what the government are hoping won't happen is that come the winter, when it's flu season, that we won't also have a huge number of COVID deaths so that the NHS is overwhelmed. But it is very much a partial thing in terms of whether you think this is a good idea or not. I think a lot of people would argue that we're going a little bit too fast too soon. We shouldn't just be flinging open the doors and letting people do what they want. And a lot of the rhetoric of the government has changed in recent days, saying that we need to stay sensible, we need to stay safe. And when we talk about face coverings, which is obviously a very visible illustration of the pandemic and our response to it, there's still going to be some rules or some suggestions. So, for example, supermarkets like Sainsbury's and Tesco's, they're going to encourage their customers to continue wearing them beyond Monday. The City Pub Group, which is 45 pubs across the UK, will do the same. And face coverings must be worn on all of London's transport networks, so buses and trains. But I think you're absolutely right. The number of people around the world that will be watching the UK and how we come out of this, how this affects things, will be great. And there is every chance that if things get too bad and the infections rise too fast, that the government may well put the brakes on. I don't think they'll want to do a complete U-turn, but they may, change a few things than what they've already said. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens next week.
Yes, watching and waiting. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
Let's change gear now and reflect on last weekend's penalty defeat for England against Italy in the final of the Euro 2020. 19 police officers were injured during violent scenes outside the stadium, and the Met reported 49 arrests. Among the incidents were the horrific levels of racial abuse on social media sites by fans targeting England's black footballers, leading to Twitter removing 1,000 posts and suspending several accounts. The disgraceful aftermath has put Spain and Portugal in the driving seat to be recommended as the European 2030 bid ahead of Britain and Ireland. Well, for more on this, I'm now being joined by the current affairs analyst and former footballer Michael Potter. He joins me from Manchester. Michael Potter, it's always a pleasure to have you on Channel's Business Global. I just can't believe the shift in atmosphere. Throwback a week ago, we were all euphoric. There was Wimbledon on. Of course, most importantly, the football was on. Now, the shift has changed dramatically. Everybody is depressed. And according to most headlines, England's bid to host the World Cup has been dealt a huge blow due to those violent clashes. What's your opinion on the whole matter?
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate the English team for the way they conducted themselves. Remember, this was a young set of players, average age 22, 23, and to reach such a final was a tremendous achievement for such a young side. And we heart in heart, we weren't really expecting them to go that far, but they surprised everybody, and they did exceptionally well. And they played as a team, and most of the English supporters were very, very pleased. How they all worked hard and played very well. However, there was an element of disappointment having reached the final at a Wembley setting in front of 60,000 mostly English supporters. The expectations of the country was very high. Remember, every time England enters a competition, the expectation of the fans is that they will win it, rightly or wrongly. And it's 1966, as we all know, when we last won a major competition, that being the World Cup. And to get to a final, the first time since 1966, was a wonderful, wonderful occasion. And unfortunately, not only did we lose on penalties, which is always something that resonates with English fans when we get to a penalty shootout, but there was also those terrible incidents that we saw on social media about, fans, unruly fans, first of all storming Wembley, getting in, breaking down a disabled barrier and charging through security guards, and those are scenes that we don't want to see. And the issue here is that 98% of English fans are genuine fans, and it's this small minority which time after time after time sends the wrong message about England to the rest of the world. And unfortunately, 8 games were played at Wembley over the Euros, and 7 of them went off fantastically well. 40,000 attendance for the earlier games. It ramped up to 60,000 for the semi-final and the final. It was policed well. Fans behaved in general very well. But on this special occasion, with the world watching, these idiots and thugs spoilt it for everybody. And I was actually in Africa, as you know, covering the Euros with Ghana TV, and I didn't know till the day after the final, when people started to come into me and saying, "Have you seen these scenes on social media?" I was embarrassed, and most of my friends in the football community are embarrassed as well. And it was a shame to end such a competition with a sad note the morning after the final. So it's disappointing. Saying that, the team has done exceptionally well. I'm proud of the English team, the young set of boys who came together and performed very, very well. And the way they conducted themselves has been fantastic, and they've done a great job, and they've represented the country in the right way.
Before I let you go, I've got to talk about the World Cup. It's in less than 500 days in Qatar. A lot of money in football. I don't know if you have heard about that. But there was lots of controversy about the successful bid of the Qataris. Apparently money exchanged hands, although, those allegations have been refuted. There was a lot of snobbery in the run-up to this World Cup. Has that snobbery been set aside? And again, I do want your thoughts on whether or not England or Britain and Ireland would be successful in hosting the following World Cup.
Yeah, well, the first point on the Qatar being nominated as the host for next year's World Cup. Well, yeah, there was lots of speculation before and even now on how they got awarded it. Qatar is not well known as a football nation. They don't really have a track record of success in football, yet somehow, they've managed to secure a World Cup hosting it. And I honestly, I don't try not to get involved in politics and what goes on behind the scenes. And I'm more focused on the sport and the competition and everybody enjoying the competitions. And if there were dealings going on behind the scenes, there's not a lot I can do about that. I just hope that it was all done honestly and fairly. But remember, there's a lot of money at stake at these World Cups, the hosting of World Cups. It brings in lots of income for the country. It gives the country the opportunity to showcase itself to the world. And whether there's things going on behind the scenes with officials, I don't honestly know. I don't have enough evidence to support that. All I can say now, it's too late to change it, whether or not there has been going on there. So we're set for next year for the World Cup. It's going to be in Qatar, and I just hope that it's going to be a successful one. With regard 2030 World Cup, which is a joint hosting application from both England and Ireland, Great Britain and Ireland, whether this will have a negative effect on the application of the British and Irish application, I don't honestly know. But if we go back to other World Cups that were hosted in Russia and the Netherlands and European Championships in Italy, there was also breakouts of violence there by their local fans, and there was elements, particularly in Russia, of racial abuse against some of the players taking part. So it's not solely an English thing. It's not solely. It does happen in other countries, but wherever it happens, it's the unacceptable face of sport, and it's the unacceptable face of football. but unfortunately, it's something that we're getting in all major competitions. I wish we could stamp it out, but it seems to be forever rearing its ugly head.
It does, doesn't it? Michael Potter, current affairs analyst and former footballer. Always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much. Nice to talk to you again.
Thank you. In a few minutes, I'll be discussing the oil battle engulfing the Virunga National Park in the DRC with Landry Nintreste. But before then, here's some company news for you. The Daily Mail and General Trust have confirmed that the Rothermere family is preparing a takeover offer for the group, valuing the company at £810 million. DMGT is the owner of the Daily Mail and Mail Online, and the Rothermere family already hold a controlling stake in the business. If confirmed, the takeover will mark a major restructuring of the group, which owns a string of popular media businesses. Shares in DMGT jumped 9% following the announcement. India's e-commerce giant Flipkart has raised $3.6 billion following a round of fresh investment by global backers, which includes its parent company Walmart and China's Tencent. India has one of the fastest growing and largest internet populations in the world, and a push towards digitization has accelerated during the pandemic as purchases have shifted online. In the final quarter of 2020, India's e-commerce sector grew 36% year on year. Flipkart's competitors include Amazon as well as domestic rival JioMart. The latest round of fundraising gives the group a market capitalization of $37.6 billion. The European Union has announced that it is to postpone its push for a controversial digital tax so that the group can turn its focus on negotiating the broader minimum global tax deal struck by the world's largest economies. Washington has lobbied against the levy on digital sales as it was overwhelmingly targeting Silicon Valley tech giants. Last weekend, G20 nations agreed on the outlines of a global corporate tax agreement designed to stop major corporations from moving to low-tax jurisdictions. Now to our next story. The Virunga National Park, located in the eastern part of the DRC, has been at the crossroads of an intense conflict for oil involving foreign fossil fuel interests, armed militia groups and corrupted officials for almost a decade. Despite the global trend to shift away from fossil fuels and invest in renewable energy, the DRC is being accused of taking a dangerous and unsustainable path towards oil exploration and exploitation. Well, for more on this story, I'm now being joined by Landry Nintreste, the Regional Director at 350.org. He joins me from Uppsala in Sweden. Landry Nintreste, thank you so much for joining me on Channels Business Global. I always like to talk about Democratic Republic of Congo, but sadly on Channels Business Global, the stories that I've been talking about over the past couple of months aren't necessarily the happiest of ones. When it pertains to this story, we know the blessing and the curse of oil, especially in Nigeria, and it has been well documented over the entire continent. But for our viewers that may not be familiar with the issues regarding the Virunga National Park, can you please provide an overview and some context about what's happening?
Thank you very much for having me today. Indeed, Virunga National Park is one of the Africa's oldest and most biodiverse park on the continent. It is home to different unique and rare species from birds, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, as well as medicinal plants. It's quite big in terms of size. It has almost 8,000 square kilometers that stretches in the eastern part of DRC at the border of Rwanda and Uganda, at the heart of the Congo tropical rainforest. The park holds a special significance for the population around. So there are hundreds of thousands of communities that depend on the park, like the park's resources and activities that include tourism, farming, and fisheries. So, however, I have to say that the park current state and future is at stake at the moment, because between 2005 and 15, the government of the Congo had approved license to oil concessions in the park at the heart of the park, which is quite a dramatic development, and that's threatened directly all the activities that I just mentioned. It's a danger not only to the ecosystem, the rich biodiversity of the park, but most importantly to the communities, the hundreds of people in that part of the Congo, and somehow in the larger Great Lakes region that depends on whose livelihoods depends on the park resources and activities. So that's the picture.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about the communities because unfortunately, especially when you're living in the global north, some of these statistics seem to be just statistics, but they are real people. We will get to that. There seems to be a massive gap, Landry, because we have heard from all of the oil majors, BP, Royal Dutch Shell, Total, they're all talking about this shift to net zero emissions and the fact that the oil peak is over. And we have heard from all of the multinationals, every single organisation that's working within Africa, that there is this drive towards renewable energy. But it's not happening. It's not happening. Why is there such a gap? Why isn't all of the talk turning into reality, do you think?
So first of all, I just want to say that the term, right, net zero, which is now like a trendy one, used almost by all the world biggest pollutant and government, is essentially used as a facade to evade responsibility and not really take the real action, which is at the moment required to tackle the climate crisis. So net zero doesn't mean zero emissions. I think we should be clear about that. And that shouldn't be accepted as a real, durable, significant solution to the crisis that we are confronted with at the moment. So the climate crisis at the moment demands that the world, the planet collectively reach real zero emissions as soon as possible. Actually, there is no time to reduce or to cut down the current emission because we've already gone too far. At 350, we used to refer to the parts per million. So at the moment, the world is over 415 ppm parts per million, while we should be at the surface level of 350 ppm. So you can see that we are already in the red zone. So for Africa, you were asking why it's not happening. I would say the shift or the transition to renewable energy is happening probably at a slower pace than it should, but it is already happening, and that's the right direction to go if we were to prevent and avoid the climate catastrophic scenarios that are being projected from time to time. This is important because the transition to clean energy, to clean sources of energy, will not only address the energy crisis, which Africa is confronted with. I just want to remind our audience that half of the population across Africa don't have access to clean energy, and that's in terms of statistics about 600 million. So the transition will not only address that gap, that huge gap, but also other economic and social needs that we know are quite abundant in the continent. So renewable such as solar, wind, hydro produces less, if not zero emissions. And that can be implemented without needing to connecting to big, large, grids, especially in the rural areas where we know where the demands are extremely important.
Absolutely. Thanks for providing some background information there. Before I let you go, Landry, again, we've got to talk about these communities because over the past couple of years, there have been some pretty contentious David versus Goliath cases between some of these impoverished communities and these oil drilling companies. But what is the truth behind the headlines, particularly as it pertains to the Virunga National Park community?
Mm-hmm. So, as you said, truthfully, there have been some recent court cases. I think the one we still have in mind, the very recent one, is about Shell, which has been condemned to significantly reduce its emission by 45% compared to 2019 levels. So what does that say? That's a message. That's a message, a very clear one, that oil companies have caused and are still causing, unfortunately, climate change. The second thing, that's also a clear responsibility on them to do the reparation.
Well, absolutely. Thank you very much, Landry Nintereste, Regional Director of 350.org. It's such a crucial topic, so we'll certainly be catching up with you later on in the year to find out more about your campaign. Hopefully it's a successful one. Thank you for joining me on the show. Well, sadly, that's all we have time for today, but do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channels Business Global. Goodbye.